tutor, and yeah, and I love helping students and helping people. And a very common topic nowadays is the topics of emotional expression, mental health, right? So this presentation is going to have three components. The first one is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what mental health is, a little bit about different types of mental health issues. And the second part of the presentation will be I'll be sharing my personal story with mental health, and also what are some positive things, what are some consequences of having like mental health issues. And the third component would be constructive solutions to solve mental health issues, and also what you can do as a teacher and as a person to help yourself, help students. And there'll be a Q&A at the very end, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So we're going to start out with what is mental health? Now, mental health is the state of your psychological and emotional well-being. It is necessary resource for living a healthy life and a main factor in overall health. Now, it does not mean the same thing as mental illness. However, poor mental health can lead to mental and physical illness. So now, good mental health allows you to feel, think, and act in ways that help you enjoy life and cope with its challenges. Now, this can be really positive or negative. So you'll see its influence by life experiences, such as family situations, the death of a loved one. You also have financial and employment difficulties, relationships with others. It could be friends, the lack of friends. It could also be family members, coworkers, schoolmates. It could be bullying at school. That happens a lot. It could also be your physical health, such as problems such as a long-term illness, such as cancer, a problematic substance use. So like alcoholism is a big issue, and also the type of community you live in, and if it's supportive or if it's not supportive. Yeah. Yeah, and then for the next slide, it would be yeah, so as you can see, mental health impacts everybody. And sometimes people can feel like they're carrying a lot of weight. So lots of pressure. It could be pressure from school, pressure from family. And yeah, this can have lots of consequences on a person's physical well-being. And then yeah, for the next slide. Yeah, yeah, thank you, Alina. Yeah, so for there's now a very common thing is anxiety disorders. Now, most of this information comes from the government of Canada. It comes particularly from Health Canada, which is the major authority in physical and mental health for the country. So, anxiety disorders is one of the most common issues people face. These disorders can be successfully treated, so it is important to recognize the difference between being anxious in response to a real event and an anxiety disorder which produces fear or distress that is out of proportion to the situation. Now, a little bit of background on anxiety disorder is everybody feels anxious at certain times. Workplace pressure, planning a big event such a wedding, or writing an exam can cause feelings of weariness or even fear. While these situations are uncomfortable, they may be more severe for those who suffer from anxiety disorder. People who suffer from anxiety disorder have long periods of intense feelings of fear or distress out of proportion to real events. Their brains interpret real or imagined events to be much more risky or dangerous than they really are. Their lives are full of unease and fear, which interferes with their personal and professional relationships. Now, anxiety disorders affect children. It also affects adults. All too often, people mistake these disorders for mental weaknesses or instability. Now, the social stigma attached to mental illness often prevents those with anxiety disorders from asking for help. Yeah. And then for the next slide, we also have some different anxiety disorders. And yeah, so for anxiety disorders, they affect your behavior, they affect your thoughts, your emotions, and physical health. It is believed that a combination of biological factors, brain functions, personal circumstances, combined with social and economic factors cause anxiety disorders. The same way, and these things combined with other factors what cause anxiety disorders. People often suffer from more than one anxiety disorder, and those with anxiety disorders often suffer from depression, eating disorders, or substance abuse as well. The good news is that anxiety disorders can be successfully treated once they are recognized. Yeah. Now, there are different types and symptoms of anxiety disorders, and we're going to explore what those are. Now, panic disorder, which is a common one. Now, people with this disorder have panic attacks in which they're suddenly terrified without warning. They may also have chest pain, heart palpitation, shortness of breath, dizziness, so stomach discomfort, feelings of unreality. So things don't really feel real. Fear of dying. That's a big one for a lot of people. A lot of people are afraid of death. Now, if you avoid situations that may cause a panic attack, the condition is known as a panic disorder, and it's also with agoraphobia. So for the next slide, we're going to discuss these common things, right? And mental health issues, anxiety disorders, depressions, all these things impact the person. They impact the person's social well-being, and they impact the person's physical well-being. Yeah. And then for the next one, we have phobias. So what are phobias? Phobias are only considered disorders if they keep the affected person from leading a normal life. For example, people who have a phobia or fear of being in places or situations from which escape might be difficult or embarrassing. It may be too fearful or even leaving the house. This type of phobia is called agoraphobia. There are two categories of phobias. There's a social phobia. It's basically fear of social situations. So whenever you're with a crowd of people, with large groups of people, this is a social phobia. And a specific phobia is such as fear of flying, fear of spiders, blood, heights, hospitals. Now, for social phobias, is intense and it's also intensely fearful of social situations. Being with people can paralyze them and make them feel unnaturally self-conscious. People are worried about being judged, criticized, or they're terrified of doing something wrong in front of other people. Because their feelings are so intense, people tend to avoid situations that might trigger this type of fear. This dramatically limits their ability to lead a normal life or to interact with other people. Now, there's also specific type of phobias. Now, people with a specific type of phobia have an overwhelming, irrational fear of a specific environment or object. Now, examples include fears of flying, bugs, which are really common, snakes, heights, or even open spaces. Now, people are unable to control their terror. Now, this is a big issue, right? Because the problems with these phobias is some of them could last a very long time or very short time. And sometimes people might not recognize that their fears are ungrounded. Now, exposure to the feared situation causes them extreme anxiety or even panic attacks. Yeah, and for the next slide, we're going to talk about a very common disorder, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, or in short is PTSD. Now, this is a disorder that is triggered by a victim relying on a terrifying experience in which they were threatened with or suffered physical, mental, or emotional harm. Now, survivors of rape, natural disasters, child abuse, or even war may all develop post-traumatic stress disorder. The most common symptoms of this are flashbacks, in which you constantly relive this terrifying experience or situation. There's also nightmares. That's a very common one. There's also signs of depression and feelings of anger or being irritable or frustrated. Yeah. And then for the next type is a very common one. As you can see, Yeah, so as you can see, soldiers are actually suffer a lot from post-traumatic stress disorder. And also families, right? Unfortunately, war impacts people, and it impacts people in very negative ways. So what's happening in Ukraine is a very sad thing for a lot of families, right? Because war impacts children, it impacts wives, and husbands, families. And now we're going to talk about other possible solutions to help with post-traumatic stress disorder. But first, we're going to talk about another very common disorder, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, people with this disorder suffer from persistent, unwanted thoughts, obsessions really, or behavioral habits, which are compulsions, which they cannot control. Now, typical obsessions are contamination. So, for example, people washing their hands frequently, 2, 3, 4 times more. This is because of germs. People are afraid of germs. So, doubt. Did I turn off the stove or the iron? So constant rumination, constant self-doubt. You can also have disturbing religious thoughts. This also goes hand in hand with obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, some compulsions include, as I mentioned, constant washing, constant organizing, constant checking something again and again, also counting. All these are signs of obsessive compulsive disorder. And then for the next slide, we're going to talk about a very common one, which is generalized anxiety disorder. With this disorder, people worry excessively about ordinary, everyday type of situations and events. The condition usually lasts for at least 6 months. During this time, the affected person expects the worst to happen, even when there is no evidence that it will. The physical symptoms may include nausea, trembling, fatigue, muscle tension, and headaches. And then for the next one, we're going to talk about, so for generalized anxiety disorder, lots post-traumatic stress disorder, unfortunately, it impacts lots of families, it impacts lots of children. Here in Canada, a very common issue is generalized anxiety disorder. And I remember when I was in high school, I got to see lots of my classmates suffer from frequent anxiety, anxiety for exams, family problems. That's a big one, right? That causes a lot of issues with children. And then for the next slide, we're going to talk about people experiencing panic disorders. So an example, people experiencing panic disorders can benefit from learning new breathing and meditation techniques, which can help them deal with their anxiety. This can also help children especially. Support groups and learning more about the disorder can also help many people deal with anxiety disorders. Now, involving family and friends is very important. People have to know exactly what you're going through and what you're feeling. And this can help in so many ways in recovery or learning how to cope with a specific condition. Now, the most important step in treatment is to get a proper diagnosis from a specialist in an anxiety disorder, so a psychologist, a therapist. Many people suffer for 10 years or more before getting the proper treatment. And for the next slide, we're going to talk about depression, which is unfortunately a very common issue. So, a little bit about depression. Everybody has periods of unhappiness in their lives, such as the death of a loved one, job dissatisfaction. It could also, many people become temporarily down when things don't seem to be going well. These feelings are a normal part of life. Major depression is a clinical term used by psychiatrists to define a time period that lasts more than 2 months, in which a person feels worthless and hopeless. So these are some signs of major depression. And then for the next slide, we're going to talk about a very important issue, which are causes of depression. Many factors contribute to the development of major depression. An individual may be genetically predisposed to depression, and his or her risk can be increased by several external factors. They include the death or illness of a spouse, friend, family member. You can also have difficulties at work or with a personal relationship. You can also have low self-esteem, financial difficulties, or also addictions. Alcoholism and drugs are big ones. And for the next slide, we're going to be talking about alcoholism, drugs, which unfortunately, a lot of people, they don't know how to deal with their emotions. They don't know how to deal with their personal issues. So a lot of people turn to alcohol, they turn to smoking, they turn to drugs. But unfortunately, it's a form of escapism, and this impacts the person's health, mental and physical health, and it also impacts their surroundings, family, friends. And for the next slide, yeah, symptoms. What are the symptoms of depression? Now, depression can affect the way you think and behave and can have physical effects as well. Now, some of the signs you should be aware of are feelings of despair, feelings of hopelessness, detachment from life and the people around you, or always feeling tired or having no energy. You can also cry for no apparent reason. And you can also not being able to concentrate or make proper decisions. You can also have thoughts of suicide, a loss of appetite, or change in sleep patterns. You can also have chronic headaches or have stomach upsets that occur frequently. And for the next slide, we're going to be talking about basically minimizing your risk. So if you or someone close to you suffers from depression, these points may help. No individual or family member should feel responsible for depression. It is an illness which often has complex causes. Blaming somebody for their depression or telling them to pull themselves together doesn't help and may further isolate the individual. You can also talk to your family doctor or your mental health professional, such as a psychologist or a therapist. Now, if a family member or friend is depressed, offer to go with them and help them. You can also talk to them, be a good listener, and try to get the person who is depressed to talk about his or her feelings. Now, that's one of the most important things is communication. Communication actually is a cure. It helps a lot from people suffering from a lot of illnesses and mental health issues. You can also let them know that it is all right to talk about these things. Don't contradict them or try to talk them out of it. Sometimes people just need you to listen. You can also involve other friends and family members if the person with depression agrees. The more support you get, the better it will be. And then for the next slide, we're going to be basically talking about you can also minimize your risk. You can pick a time and place to do your worrying and make it the same time and place every day. So spend 30 minutes thinking about your fears and what you can do about them. Don't dwell on what might happen, focus on what is actually happening. So lots of reflection and lots of meditation. Yoga actually helps. Muscle relaxation. So biofeedback and deep breathing can all help you deal with your anxieties. Now see the link in the Need More Info, which will later be provided section for more information. Now for muscle relaxation, simply lie down and focus on one muscle group at a time, starting with your feet or your head. Now tense the muscle for a few seconds, then let go. Move on to the next muscle. Now you can also, a very important thing is to get plenty of sleep. It will help you put things in a perspective. You can also confront the things that have made you anxious in the past. You might start by making a list. Then picture yourself confronting these type of situations. This way you can develop techniques to deal with them before you're actually anxious. You might also try examining the level of your anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10. You can also exercise regularly. It can give you a sense of well-being and help lessen anxiety. You must always avoid alcohol and recreational drugs. Although they may seem to relax you while you're taking them, afterwards they can lead to even more anxiety and depression. You should also avoid caffeine found in coffee, tea, soft drinks, and chocolate. They can increase your level of anxiety. Also avoid over-the-counter diet pills and cough and cold medication. And for the next slide, we're going to be talking about a very interesting thing, which would basically be what can help you protect your personal mental health. Now, regardless of your age, You can have better mental health if you follow a healthy eating pattern, which supports a healthy body and brain. If you're physically active, this will reduce stress and help with concentration. You must always get enough sleep, which makes you more alert and able to cope with stress. Now, certain life circumstances can help protect your mental health. These include living in a safe community that is accepting, supportive, and free of violence, having healthy and supportive relationships, which will help you form meaningful connections with people. Also, living in housing that is clean and well maintained, getting an education, and having a steady jobs. All these things help protect your mental health. And for the next slide, we're going to be talking about, yeah, so as I said, having healthy eating habits. So unfortunately, lots of children eat junk food, burgers, hot dogs, French fries, and all these things impact mental health and also physical health. Another thing is education, spending time with friends, talking to the teacher, actually communication helps a lot in prevent mental health issues. And then for the next slide,
So,
we're
Brian, I wanted to take a pause. Maybe
yeah,
we can have some questions from the audience so far from what they heard, or maybe they want to add something.
yeah, definitely.
Um, so feel free. You can maybe write a message in the chat, or just open up your mic and give us a question. Or maybe you want to share your personal experience with the mental health and like working at school with the kids. And, yes, Pavlo, yes. You can unmute
I
yourself.
yes. No, I like the best is avocado is very health for our mm, our no, it's very health because it's
Okay.
very and very no, I don't like the salad is for me disgust. No, but I like the
Pavlo,
cabbage.
I'm sorry. Are you a teacher or you're a student? Can I ask?
I'm student.
Student. Oh, I'm sorry, but this is supposed
Uh,
to be for the teachers. How did you get
uh,
the link? Did your teacher send you the link?
no, no, it's very interesting. I like join every meeting.
Oh, but how did you get the link? Because we sent it only to the teachers who applied.
Uh, oh, oh,
Oh,
No, it's okay, Pavlo. No
uh,
worries. It's
uh,
just we are just
oh,
surprised
yeah,
and puzzled.
we did
It's
not expect
great. It's great that you are here.
and
If
you're
it's
interested.
interesting, you can stay. No worries. By the way,
Teacher, can the students be here in this conversation, or we must quit?
Supposed
no, you maybe you mustn't just leave us. No, please stay. If it's interesting for you,
okay, yes,
you can look behind the curtains. It's okay.
yeah.
But our initial idea, dear students, was
okay.
just yesterday or
Okay.
maybe 2 weeks ago, it was just to
Mm,
make a presentation for the teachers. But
mm,
maybe you would like to devote your life to the psychology. Nobody knows.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's not the first time happening, right? So I shouldn't be so surprised, right?
You know, it's a great feature of the Ukrainian teachers because we do our best to provide our students with all possible opportunities.
yes.
Yeah.
So if they can see a volunteer, they will bring the students here. It's great, really, because it means how important it is. And by the way, Brian, what is the system which helps you to support such students while they are preparing for the tests? Because as I remember, there is a special activities or I don't know services for them to support and care about their needs and interests. So maybe you can share
Yeah.
your own experience, not from the slide, but from your professional perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it depends if it's like elementary school students or high school students, right? A lot of times when students are stressed because of exams, just talking to students is helpful. Actually, a very interesting technique is putting music. So, very calming music actually helps students a lot. And when they're doing an exam, when they're doing something that's very stressful for them, putting music actually is very relaxing. And yeah, in a lot of my classes, there's actually some music, and that actually kind of relaxes students. It calms them down, and also just talking to students, right? A very important thing is communication, and that helps a lot in just decreasing stress. Yeah.
What is your favorite track for such an activity?
Yeah, so there's a lot of on YouTube. It's kind of like not classical music, but it's very like soft type of music, kind of like nature sounds, and it's like music that's very it would make you feel like it's kind of meditative, right? Yeah.
By the way, do you use meditation in your practice? Because for our teaching experience and dear colleagues, you can share, by the way, in the chat box. Do you use meditation during your lessons? It's quite new. It's unfamiliar and unusual. Even for me as a person, I haven't tried to meditate before. So, what is your attitude to this activity? Is it effective in your context?
Yeah, so like meditation is like, I would say it's actually very effective in many ways, especially with breathing techniques. So a lot of times in a lot of classes, as an example, yeah, you would like all the students would get up from their chairs, they would form a circle, and then just like take some deep breaths, just kind of like breathe in and out, and also kind of sharing your emotions, right? So what would happen in a circle is everybody would say how they're feeling today. So are you feeling happy? Are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling tired? So the students get to move around. So that's like some physical exercise. They get to bond with one another, get to express their emotions, and also learn something about breathing, which actually helps a lot in decreasing stress and anxiety.
And
Yeah.
could you like recommend like other strategies for managing stress and anxiety for students?
Yeah, definitely. A very effective one is actually writing, right? So at the very beginning of classes, I would tell my students, oh, can you please write? I would have a series of questions and I would have them write down, hey, how was your weekend? Was it exciting? How was like your family? What does happiness mean to you? Or have you been feeling stressed or anxious? Or what stresses you out of life? Or what makes you unhappy? So I would have students write that down, and that immediately that kind of takes the pressure from their minds, right? It takes the pressure from them out of them emotionally, so they can get it out of their system, and that way they have it on paper, right? And I would tell them you can destroy the paper, or you can rip it up, or you can save it and read it and just kind of reflect on it, right? It's kind of a good technique for self-reflection, and it also gets it out of your system, right? Because a lot of times, a lot of students, a lot of young children, teenagers, they have lots of pressure. And the thing is, when they get it out on writing with a piece of paper, it takes some of that pressure off. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for sharing. By the way, we've got some messages in the chat that our colleagues also use the same breath techniques, even the colored therapy. And we've got a long question from Galia. Could you just, is it comfortable for you to open the chat box and read the question, not to...
I could read it as well.
Okay, Alenочка.
Could you share the procedures, strategies, and techniques Canadian teachers and educators use that they're helpful for dealing with students who have challenging behaviors?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, especially challenging behaviors, right? And a lot of schools, a lot of high schools and elementary schools have therapists. They also have psychologists, right? So if a student is misbehaving, they're being aggressive, they have like anger issues. I've seen that in a lot of schools. So what would happen is a teacher would actually send the student to the psychologist, the school counselor, and so they can get some help, right? Because there's a reason why the student is behaving that way, and the best person would be like a psychologist, therapist, to try to see what is happening, right? Is it something, a problem in the family? Is it problems with the bullying. So bullying is very common is if the student is misbehaving or maybe has a lot of like a lot of problems at home, right? And sometimes that translates into problems at school, right? So a very important thing is therapy, counseling, and to actually get to understand what the problem is with the student. Yeah.
Great. So you touched upon a topic of bullying. I think that's a very
Yeah.
relevant thing in Ukraine and I guess around the world. So how do you address bullying as a teacher? What are your, maybe you can share some success stories that you had in your classrooms.
Yeah, definitely. So in a lot of my classrooms, one of the thing, it's really interesting and it's a positive thing. In Canada, there's lots of organizations that actually give presentations to like teachers, to students, and it's on bullying prevention, right? And one of the things is they talk about is freedom of expression, and also how you should express your emotions, right? Because a lot of people who are bullied, a lot of people who get mistreated, they're kind of shy, they're kind of reserved to speak out because of fear of being ridiculed, fear of being judged and criticized. And a very important thing is actually get to understand what's happening. And if a person's bullying somebody else, again, it would be like psychologist, counselor, or talking to the person um, like face to face and saying, okay, why are you doing this? And try to create a positive environment so the victim and also the victimizer actually have a conversation while the teacher is present, right? And get to understand, okay, how can we resolve this? Why is this person getting bullied? And just being a positive role model, right? Because teachers are like parents, right? A teacher is like the father or mother in a way in school, and they have to be very good role models in many positive ways. So I would say communication and just conversation, as well as being involved and engaged to help students. Yeah.
And by the way, you know, in Ukraine, we've got such lessons of happiness. It's like specific lessons for our students when we teach them how to be happy. Any
Interesting.
similar experience in Canada? Do you got such specific, I don't know, events or sessions or lessons for your students, or it's integrated in the educational process somehow?
Yeah, so that's actually a very interesting thing. For mental health, like in my experience, even like when I was younger, when I was in high school, when I was in college, mental health wasn't talked about frequently, right? I remember when I was a kid, when I was growing up, the schools had a school counselor, a therapist, and a psychologist. Nowadays, a lot of teachers, what they do have is they try to include a specific type of course, a specific type of class, but it's mental health, right? And this is a positive thing. Now in Canadian society, it's changing because they're introducing more mental health, like what is mental health, how to solve mental health issues, and because a lot of students sometimes when they have depression, they have anxiety, they don't know how to deal with these things, right? So their presenters come into schools and give examples, real life experiences from people who have struggled with mental health issues, and they try to guide students on what to do if you feel depressed, if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, if you have like any issues at all. And also the government of Canada gives lots of resources for teachers, such as phone numbers, which is a very popular one is Kids Help Phone, which is a special type of like it's like a company, and what it does is if a kid has like mental health issues, anger, anxiety, like depression, there you can call this number and they have therapists and counselors at 24/7, and that's a positive thing. Yeah.
So do you think it's an effective way to have this like hotlines and the students actually use them and it has like positive effect?
Yeah, I actually kind of feel it does have lots of positive effects though. Some of my friends, when I grew up, when I was in high school, I remember they used Kids Help Phone, and they actually got help, right? Because unfortunately for young people, children, teenagers, sometimes they have difficulties expressing their emotions, especially to teachers, to adults, to their own family, right? So they need an extra type of support system where they can kind of express themselves, understand more about what emotional honesty is, and just having more freedom of expression and getting to practice that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Brian, and in what way do you support teachers? Because teachers are still human beings, and we
Yeah.
do need some understanding, care, and support. How is it organized in your country?
Yeah, definitely. That's actually a very good question. In Canada, they also, it's an interesting thing. A lot of teachers, they work overtime. A lot of, a very common stereotype is teachers, they get burned out, right? Because teaching is a very, it's a wonderful profession, but unfortunately, it's also an exhausting profession, right? Because you're literally working like every single day. You come home, you do lesson plans, you have to like check homework, and teachers get burned out, right? And the positive thing is lots of schools also have counselors and psychologists where teachers can actually like talk to the school psychologist, the school counselor. There's also resources from the Canadian government that if you have any mental health issues, you can call this hotline as well. So there's lots of great resources for teachers who like face mental health issues as well.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think what is important? So, like giving psychological support, obviously that's important. And how do you think what other resources government provide to support teachers?
Yeah, so in Canada, lots of supports they get is vacation time. Sometimes the positive thing is if you have mental health issues, if you tell your employer, okay, I'm not feeling well, it's actually a right. It's kind of like a physical illness, right? And you can actually have some time off from school if you like basically tell your employer, oh, I have severe depression, I have a post-traumatic stress disorder, and then you basically could submit a specific type of form and they could actually give you time off, right? Because that thing is like any mental illness, any mental health issue, it's you have a right as a teacher as well to have some time off, right? And you can also take that with government, and government is actually supportive of that, which is a positive thing.
So can a person take like a half a year off, let's say, if he needs to, or there is a time limit?
Yeah, it depends on the situation, right? Because yeah, it really depends. Like for some like really bad mental illnesses, like for example, a death of a spouse, death of a family member, you can get some time off, right? But if you take too much time off, you could actually even lose your job, right? It also depends on the province, and it depends on the place because Canada, every single province, every single province is kind of they have different regulations and different kind of laws, right? It's very different. Like here in British Columbia, where I live, it's totally different to Quebec. They have different systems, different laws. So yeah, it varies from place to place as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dear participants, we are so talkative with Alena today because it's our favorite job to do it. Any
Yeah.
questions or suggestions from you, please feel free to unmute your microphone or use the chat box. Don't be shy.
Or maybe you want to share your experience dealing with bullying in your class and like some strategy that you found was useful. Would be nice, yeah, to share with colleagues.
Yeah. Like yeah, I could share like some ideas first as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's the thing with bullying. One of the positive things is basically communication, right? Is observing the students and watching, okay, who is getting bullied and why, right? And then talking to the student and basically having communication, right? Is engaging with what is happening and actually putting a stop to it, right? Because unfortunately, bullying is very common, right? It happens, everybody experiences, it happens to adults as well. It even happens to teachers, right? It's yeah. And the thing is communication, talking to people and having the problem stopped immediately, right? Because the thing is, if you just do nothing, it just progressively gets worse and worse, and it could have a very negative impact on the classroom environment and on the student. Yeah.
Mhm. Great. So we have like 28 people. Anyone want to share or maybe
Can I ask a question to Brian?
Victoria? Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, it is very interesting to know, Brian, which what exercises, practical exercises can you share, which you can implement into your lessons? Can you play with us a little and show what practical exercises can we use on at our lessons to decrease the anxiety?
Yeah, definitely. One of them is group circles. I actually find that helps a lot, right? It's a very practical thing. Getting the students up from the classroom, everybody shares their emotions, playing games with the students at the beginning, kind of laughter, right? It sounds very simple, and laughter actually decreases lots of anxiety, lots of stress, right? I've noticed it with my students. Sometimes at the beginning of a class, they're very tense, they're kind of shy. Getting them moving, even if it's like online, getting the students to get up out of the chair, because a lot of times when you're sitting down constantly, it's you're kind of stuck in a fixed position, right? But getting the students to move around physically and getting them to share emotions, maybe some jokes at the beginning, just getting people to laugh and loosen up, it kind of helps the environment, right? Because a lot of students, when they're having fun, when they're like relaxed, they get to learn more. They're able to absorb the knowledge. They're able to be more engaged, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for sharing your ideas. It was very interesting.
Yeah, for sure, Victoria. Yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. I've got a question also. May I?
Sure,
Yeah.
Antonina, go ahead. Yeah.
So, it was asked if we use meditations. Firstly, I wanted to share my ideas that I use with my children. Sorry for
Yeah.
interruption.
Hey, how's it going?
So, the thing is that while writing some tests with students, I switched on some light classical music, and I want to say that it makes sense doing this. At first, the children were excited, and they didn't understand why this was used for. Yes, but when you do it time to time, it makes sense. They calm themselves down, and they can do the test better than they could without it. So it makes sense, and time to time I do it. And my question was, it's a little bit a big problem here in Ukraine, in Ukrainian schools for children using their phones. At first, we implemented them doing some activities, but time to time, children cheat, and there is also as advantages as disadvantages. And my question was, do you use telephones at the lessons, or they forbidden?
Yeah, so thank you, Antonina. That's a great question, and I'm happy you use music with your students. That does help a lot. And yeah, here in Canada, they have a cell phone ban. So this actually is brand new, and it was made by the government, especially like here in British Columbia. And what it is if a student has a cell phone in class, the teacher takes the cell phone, puts it in like a little basket, and a student is not allowed. Sometimes this works. Sometimes this does not. It's up to the teacher. The teacher is given like a lot of power to see, okay, what works in my classroom or what does not, right? Because ultimately, the teacher knows his or her students the best. And it works sometimes, right? Having a complete cell phone ban. And it's harder over Zoom. It's harder online because sometimes you don't get to see what the student is doing. Sometimes the student is not engaged. Other times it's just having a frank and like a upfront conversation, right? It's telling the students, oh, please, I can see you're playing with a cell phone. Can you put it away? Or unfortunately, you're going to be kicked out of the Zoom lesson, right? And there's a common thing here in Canada and the United States is 3 strikes and you're out, which means 3 warnings and then no more, right? And yeah, it's kind of like a warning for the student. Please put the cell phone away. If you don't, you're going to be kicked out of the class, right? And I've seen it in classrooms in Canada, and also in the United States they do that, right? It's kind of like you get a warning to be like kind and compassionate, but also there has to be like boundaries because the student needs to learn, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice thing that you noticed. It could be different, right? When it's like a virtual classroom and a physical classroom, it's a bit hard
Yeah.
to control. Yeah, if the kids turn off the camera, how would you know
Yeah.
if they're using the phone or not, or they're coming to the class and using their phone? So yeah, that's a tricky one. So yeah, we are unfortunately we won't be able to finish the slides, but we can have still few like 1 or 2 questions from
Yeah.
our teachers. Let's see if anyone wants to ask something like our last questions. Anyone? Or maybe Brian, you want to add something to wrap up our conversation today?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to wrap it up, it's yeah, mental health is a very common thing, right? Here in Canada, it's a very normal topic. It's a very common topic. And the thing is, the more people talk about mental health issues, depression, anxiety, a lot of people struggle with these things. And the more people share these things, the more people are able to help each other out. And in a classroom environment, when students learn that it is okay to express feelings. It is okay to feel sad once in a while or to feel angry, but to use these feelings and emotions in a constructive way, kind of like teaching students and being a role model like yourself, right? It helps so many people, right? With a lot of my students, I try to tell them and be as emotionally honest with them, but also telling them and expressing how freedom of expression and how emotions are your greatest superpower. They can actually help you and other people, or it could be the opposite, right? But the most important thing is to express those emotions in a healthy way. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a question. So how can parents and teachers better support teenagers in maintaining a healthy balance between academics, social life, and mental well-being? That's a great one.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. And another time it comes to like communication, right? Is talking to the teenagers. Parents know their sons and daughters better than teachers, right? The parents know, like they know their kids very well. And I think communication is one of the best things, right? And also being engaged and observing, okay, there's something wrong with my son. Is there something wrong with my daughter? Why is she behaving like this? So constantly trying to be engaged with your kid, and also like a teacher, being engaged with the students, kind of like understanding maybe like this student is having problems at home. So just talking about it, communication, and then trying to get the student to open up, trying to get the student to like express themselves so they can find out, okay, what is the best approach to help this person so this person can actually live a happy, healthy life, right? Yeah.
And so how about maintaining balance, right? Let's say they have to study a lot, right? So
Yeah.
like they give a lot of homework at school. How do teenagers can find time to do something fun? Yeah, if they have
Yeah.
to study a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. A lot of young people face lots of pressure. I remember when I was a teenager, I had lots of homework, lots of assignments. It was a lot of pressure, right? And one of the things what my parents did, was we constantly went on mini trips. We constantly went to the park, spending time in nature. It's actually a very interesting thing in Canada. It's actually more and more common, that elementary school students and high school students go on lots of field trips, where they go to lots of parks, lots of hiking activities, sport activities. And these things help out, right? Because you meet new friends, you get to spend time in nature, and this improves your mental health as well.
Nice, going on field trips. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a question from Irina.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And I always wondered when this topic became interesting in Canada or the USA, because it wasn't we are not very familiar to mental health, and we got motivated by the war happening in Ukraine to support children. And I got very surprised that in other countries it is very popular, and people take care of their mental health. So what made people um, what made people take care of mental health, and maybe um, yeah, and when it was started, I mean, this interest.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a great question, Irina. Yeah. So basically, like with mental health, you were right. A long time ago, mental health was a topic that wasn't talked about a lot. I remember when I was a kid and a teenager, it wasn't common, right? It wasn't. It was something that was never like talked about. People just kind of knew about it, but it was kind of a taboo subject, right? People didn't really want to talk about it because, yeah, it's just a very intense topic. It's a very people have to be emotionally vulnerable to talk about these things because it's very personal, right? And a good thing is over the last couple of years, Canada and also the United States, because so many people struggle with mental health issues, and you can see this like on the streets of large cities like New York City, Vancouver, Toronto, is people struggle with chronic anxiety, chronic depression. These things were becoming so common because of the lifestyles, right? People's lifestyles in North America are very rushed. They're very fast paced. Yeah, if you ever like visit North America, like large cities like Vancouver, that's where I live. You'll notice that there's a lot of stress. People are constantly having lots of anxiety, and the thing is, because of this lifestyle, it got a lot of people in society interested in these things, and also like a lot of children, because of social media, because of technology. A lot of people are bombarded by so many things they watch on TV, so many things online, and unfortunately, with social media, there's lots of like hate, violence, aggression, and these things influence people. And that's why people were starting to think and people were starting to realize, hey, mental health has to be good for you to live a happier life, right? So this topic became more and more common, and even in schools nowadays, a lot of schools, elementary and high school here in Canada, have guest speakers, and also like people talking about mental health, and also people who have mental health issues, and they share their experiences, what works, what does not work, so students have an actual lived experience and get to listen to somebody who struggled with a mental health issue, so they can learn, okay, what works, what does not work, so students are better equipped to deal with these things for the future.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. So I think we're gonna finish our meeting today, unless anyone has some last questions. If not, nobody's
No.
raising hands. So I guess I'm gonna stop the recording. Okay. Let me see.